My stepmother drugged me and forced me to marry my sister's husband so I could raise his child. I changed all of that. When that bowl of soup was placed in front of me, the rising steam carried the sweet, cloying scent of medicine that I had smelled countless times in my past life. Warner. You'd better drink this calming soup right away. Your younger sister is getting married tomorrow. So get a good night's sleep tonight and don't make her worry. Her stepmother, Sue Mann, smiled gently. But a hint of barely perceptible urgency lurked in her eyes. I stared at the bowl of soup, my fingertips trembling slightly. It wasn't fear, it was hatred. In my previous life, I believed her words and lost consciousness after drinking that bowl of soup. When I woke up, I was lying in Chinzay's bed, wearing ill-fitting wedding attire, while outside the window I could hear my younger sister Lin Jiao's shrill cries and curses. They said that Lin Jiao refused to marry that good-for-nothing Chinzay, and that I, as her older sister, had to marry him in her place and raise that illegitimate child for them as well. I struggled and cried, but my father slapped me, knocking me to my knees. He said, "The Lin family has raised me all these years, and now it's time for me to repay their kindness." How did I repay him? I poured my entire dowry into his business, paid off Chinzay's gambling debts, managed his business for him, and took care of his illegitimate son. I worked myself to the point of gray hair and ruined my health, only to die in the end on a rickety wooden bed. Meanwhile, my stepmother and younger sister, dressed in the silk I had bought and wearing the jewelry Chinzay had purchased with my money, were laughing so hard they were shaking all over in the mansion. Warner. Seeing that I hadn't moved, Sue Mann softened her tone slightly, though it still carried a hint of finality. "What's the matter? Do you think the soup has gone cold?" I looked up and smiled at her. Then, with a flick of the wrist, with a sharp clang, the porcelain bowl hit the blue-gray brick floor and shattered into several pieces. The brown medicinal broth splashed onto the hem of my skirt and splattered a few drops onto Sue Mann as well. Her expression changed, and a hint of panic flashed in her eyes. But she quickly regained her loving demeanor. "You silly child. Why are you so careless?" I bowed my head, my voice trembling just enough. My daughter just suddenly remembered that my younger sister is getting married tomorrow. And I, as her older sister, haven't even prepared a decent dowry for her. My heart was heavy. So my hand slipped. Sue Mann stared at me for a moment, as if trying to gauge how much of what I said was true. I kept my head down, my shoulders trembling slightly, like a pitiful young girl who had been wronged but dared not speak up. After a long moment, she sighed and patted me on the shoulder. "Silly child. Your sister has everything she needs. She doesn't need you to add any extra touches." "Never mind. The soup spilled. I'll just have someone make another bowl." "No. Thank you, Mother." I looked up, my eyes slightly red. "I'm feeling very unsettled right now and can't bring myself to drink. Please let me go back to my room and be alone for a while." Sue Mann frowned, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end she just waved her hand. "Go on. Don't overthink it. We have to get up early tomorrow to see your sister off." I bowed slightly and turned to walk out the door. The moment the door closed behind me, the look of hurt on my face vanished instantly, replaced by a chill. I know she won't give up this bowl of soup easily, but I'm in no rush. Spilling a bowl of soup and faking it once is enough. I don't want to make a scene right then and there. I want them to keep thinking I'm still that weak and easily bullied Lin Wan. I'm going to let them keep dreaming that beautiful dream. And then, little by little, I'll pull them out of it. Back in my room, I closed the door, leaned against it, and closed my eyes. Scenes from his past life flashed through his mind like a carousel of images. Chinzay's hypocritical face, Lin Jiao's sharp tongue, Sue Mann's scheming eyes, and his father's words. "It's time for you to repay your debt of gratitude." I took a deep breath and pushed those images deep into my heart. No rush. Chinzay's gambling debt is due next month. Lin Jiao's wedding is in 3 days. Sue Mann is in such a hurry to shove me into Chinzay's bed because Chinzay owes a substantial amount of money and needs the Lin family's dowry to cover it. As for me, I have 3 days enough time to set a trap. I walked over to the dressing table, picked up a pair of scissors, and cut the bridal handkerchief which I had originally intended to give to Lin Jiao into tiny pieces. In my previous life, I had stayed up 3 nights in a row to make that handkerchief, only to be met with Lin Jiao's remark, "Who cares about your ragged piece of cloth? Now I don't have to try to please anyone anymore." I heard the sound of a maid's footsteps outside the door. It was the one Su Man had sent to keep an eye on me. I heard her ask softly from outside the door, "Miss, have you gone to bed yet?" "I'm resting," I replied softly, my voice as still as a stagnant pool. "Su Man, Chen Zai, Lin Jiao, you'll just have to wait." Early the next morning, just as dawn was breaking, the sound of things being smashed could be heard coming from Lin Jiao's courtyard. I threw on a coat and strolled over at a leisurely pace. As soon as I walked in, I saw Lin Jiao sitting at her dressing table, sweeping the rouge and powder off the table and onto the floor. Su Man stood to one side, her face ashen, yet she still lowered her voice to comfort her. "Jiao, although Chen Zai isn't an official, he's an only son. If you marry him, you'll be the matriarch of the household. Besides, you're expecting. The child I'm carrying is his." But I was just momentarily confused. Lin Jiao suddenly stood up, her eyes red and teary. "Mother, you said you'd find me a good husband. You lied to me." Su Man was so taken aback by her words that she couldn't say a thing. When she turned and saw me standing in the doorway, her expression immediately darkened. "Wan, who told you to come in? Get out of here right now." I lowered my head and said timidly, "Little sister, I heard you're getting married today, so I came especially to do your hair. This is a major event in a young woman's life. How could you possibly cry?" Lin Jiao suddenly turned her head and glared at me. Her gaze was like a poison-tipped knife. I lowered my eyes, pretending not to notice, walked over to the dressing table, picked up a comb, and gently smoothed the stray strands of hair at her temples. "Don't be upset, little sister," I said softly. "When you marry a rooster, you follow the rooster. When you marry a dog, you follow the dog. That's just fate." Lin Jiao shoved me aside. The comb fell to the floor with a sharp clatter. She glared at me, gritting her teeth. I crouched down, picked up the comb, gently blew the dust off it, and said softly, "You're right. Little sister, how could I ever dare to harbor such improper thoughts?" Su Man watched from the sidelines, her expression shifting constantly. She clearly hadn't expected Lin Jiao to make such a scene, and she certainly hadn't expected me to show up here. I stood up, stepped aside, and stood there quietly. After causing a scene for half an hour, Lin Jiao finally grew tired and slumped into a chair, crying. Su Man sighed, walked over to me, and whispered, "Wan, your sister doesn't know any better. Don't take it to heart. Just pretend you didn't see what happened today." I nodded. "I understand, Mom." Su Man stared at me for a moment, as if to make sure I had no ulterior motives. Before turning away to comfort Lin Jiao, I stepped out of the room and stood on the veranda, watching the maids and servants bustling back and forth in the courtyard, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Lin Jiao refused to marry, and Su Man was as anxious as a cat on a hot tin roof. But what they didn't know was that Chen Zai was even more anxious than they were. The gambling debt Chen Zai owed was to Jufeng, the largest gambling house in town. The owner of Jufeng was a ruthless man. Failure to repay a debt could result in anything from having a hand or foot cut off to the destruction of one's family. The reason Chen Zai was in such a hurry to marry Lin Jiao was that the Lin family's dowry could cover this debt. Now that Lin Jiao refuses to marry, Chen Zai won't be able to get the dowry, and the debt collectors from Jufeng Ho are probably already on their way. Sure enough, before long, a commotion could be heard outside the courtyard. Several burly men burst in, the one leading them, with a face full of rugged features, bellowed into the courtyard, "Where's Chen Zai? Tell him to get out here. It's only fair to pay back what you owe." Su Man turned pale and hurried out to meet them. "Gentlemen, this is the Lin residence. It's no place for you to run amok." "The Lin family." The burly man snorted derisively. "That kid Chen Zai said he married a girl from the Lin family and would pay back the money as soon as her dowry arrived. What? Is Miss Lin backing out now?" Sue Man was so taken aback that she couldn't say a word. I stood on the porch, watching the scene unfold, my heart as still as a stagnant pool. This is exactly the effect I was looking for. Sue Man had been keeping Chinzay's debt a secret from Lin's father. Lin's father was a man who valued his reputation. If he found out that his daughter's fiancé was already deep in gambling debt before she'd even married him, the marriage would likely fall through. But now that the people from the Jufengho had brought this matter out into the open in front of everyone in the mansion, even if Sue Man wanted to keep it a secret, she could no longer hide it. Sure enough, Lin's father rushed over upon hearing the news. His face ashen, he stared at Sue Man, his voice as cold as ice. Sue Man, what's going on here? Sue Man fell to her knees with a thud and said through her tears, "My lord, I had no idea. That boy Chinzay seemed so honest. How could I have known that he—" "You don't know. Mr. Lin sneered. "You were the one who brought him into the Lin family and let him and Jiao make a secret promise of marriage. Now that his creditors have come knocking, you're telling me you don't know anything about it." Sue Man was left speechless by the question. I stood there, watching Sue Man in such a sorry state, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of satisfaction. This is just the beginning. Enraged, Lin's father announced on the spot that the wedding would be postponed until Chinzay could explain the matter of his gambling debts. Sue Man and Lin Jiao knelt on the ground, weeping uncontrollably, while Chinzay, escorted by men from the Jufeng, stood there pale-faced, unable to utter a single word. I turned and walked back to my yard, closed the gate, leaned against it, and let out a long sigh. Step 1. Done. Sue Man's scheme was foiled. Lin Jiao's wedding was put on hold for the time being, and Chinzay's gambling debts were exposed. Next, it was time to address Chinzay's embezzlement of the Lin family's assets. I walked over to the dressing table, picked up a pen, and began writing a letter. The recipient was Uncle Zhou, the longtime manager of the Lin family business. Zhou Bo had served Mr. Lin faithfully for 30 years and knew every detail of the Lin family's finances like the back of his hand. In my previous life, when I was in charge of the accounts, he looked out for me in many ways. Later, when I was framed by Chinzay, he was the only one who stood up for me. Unfortunately, no one believed what he said, and in the end, Chinzay found a pretext to expel him from the Lin family. His whereabouts remain unknown. This time, I'm going to make him the sharpest knife in my hand. After I finished writing the letter, I called my personal maid and asked her to secretly deliver it to Uncle Zhou. After doing all that, I walked over to the window and opened it. The osmanthus tree in the courtyard sways gently in the breeze, and the faint scent of its blossoms drifts in. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. In the wake of the debt collection scandal involving the Jufeng, a stifling, lifeless atmosphere hung over the Lin family mansion. Mr. Lin was furious. He placed Sue Man under house arrest, and Lin Jiao was confined to the courtyard to copy the admonitions for women. Although Chinzay had been temporarily released, the manager of the Lin family money house was keeping a close eye on him, fearing he might harbor any further mischievous intentions. However, Sue Man was, after all, Sue Man. In just 2 short days, she managed by some means or other to persuade the elderly housekeeper who served Mr. Lin, causing him to change his mind. That evening, Mr. Lin's father sent someone to summon me. I changed into a simple, plain outfit and entered the study with my head bowed and a submissive demeanor. Mr. Lin was sitting in a large armchair, his face so gloomy it looked as if rain might fall from it. Sue Man stood to one side, her eyes slightly reddened, yet she still maintained her dignified and virtuous demeanor. "Wanner," Lin's father said in a hoarse voice, "your younger sister is still young and doesn't understand these things. Although Chinzay has made a mistake, he is, after all, the one your sister loves. Now that this engagement has caused such a stir throughout the city, if we were to call it off just like this, where would the Lin family's reputation stand?" I lowered my eyes and said softly, "Father is right. But since my younger sister truly does not wish to, I dare not force her." Sue Man immediately interjected, her tone earnest. Master. Jiaoer has simply let Lard cloud her judgment. She's been locked up for 2 days now and realizes her mistake. But as for Qinzhe, he still hasn't paid off his gambling debts. If we call off the engagement now, the people at Jufeng will surely drive him to his death. Jiaoer has a soft heart. I'm afraid it might end in a tragedy. Lin's father sighed and looked at me. Wan, you've always been so sensible. Since your sister refuses to marry this match. Father. I looked up. A hint of just the right amount of fear and obedience flashing in my eyes. I'm willing to marry in her place. As soon as those words were spoken, a flash of wild joy crossed Su Man's eyes, and Lin's father was taken aback. I continued. My younger sister is still young and cannot handle such a shock. Since Qinzhe has incurred gambling debts, someone must step in to cover the shortfall. Though I am of little worth, I am willing to take my dowry with me, asking only that father spare Qinzhe's life and preserve the Lin family's reputation. Su Man immediately dropped to her knees, weeping with joy. Master, Wan truly is a blessing for our Lin family. That she's willing to take this injustice upon herself for Jiaoer, it's truly. That's enough. Lin's father interrupted her, giving me a long, penetrating look. Wan, you need to think this through carefully. Qinzhe's life is a mess right now. If you marry him, you're in for a rough time. I'm not afraid of hardship, I said, lowering my head to hide the coldness in my eyes. As long as father will grant me one request. What's up? Once I'm married, I'd like to ask father to let me take charge of the Lin family's business and the money house's accounts. I looked up, my gaze steady. Lin's father was silent for a moment, then finally nodded. All right, as long as you're willing to marry me. I'll leave the management of the money house's accounts to you from now on. I knelt down and bowed my head. Thank you, father. As we were leaving the study, Su Man deliberately lingered behind. She took my hand and smiled tenderly. Wan, don't worry. Once you're married, I'll make sure Qinzhe treats you well. I'll also have a word with your younger sister so she won't cause you any trouble in the future. I bowed my head and replied softly. Thank you, mother. But inside, he couldn't help but sneer repeatedly. Su Man thought I'd fallen into her trap again. She thought I'd do exactly as I did in my past life, willingly clean up their mess for the sake of the Lin family's reputation and so-called filial piety. But she didn't know that what I wanted was precisely his power to manage the accounts. In my past life, after I married into the family, Qinzhe, citing the principle that the man is the head of the household, never let me touch the money house's ledgers. I could only hover on the sidelines, cleaning up his messes, only to have him turn the tables on me in the end, accusing me of lining my own pockets. In this lifetime, I took the initiative to request the accounts and took over the money exchange house in good faith. For the next half-month, I spent every day in the money house's accounting office, using the excuse that I was preparing for my wedding. Following my instructions, Uncle Zhou meticulously compiled a detailed record of every single instance where Qinzhe had embezzled public funds over the years, stamped it with the money house's official seal, and turned it into irrefutable evidence. Meanwhile, I wasn't sitting idle either. Under the pretext of paying off Qinzhe's debts, I made contact with the owner of the Jufeng. The owner of the Jufeng was a shrewd man. He had long since realized that Qinzhe was a good-for-nothing who couldn't be relied on. But he was stuck because he didn't have a better patron. I met with him at the tea house and said just one thing. The Lin family can pay off Qinzhe's gambling debts. But from now on, Jufeng must do as I say. The boss looked at me, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes, then smiled. Miss Lin, you really are straightforward. As long as the money is in place, the Jufeng will be at your service from now on. Everything is going according to my plan. As for Qinzhe, Su Man secretly slipped him a large sum of silver to appease him, believing that the Lin family would continue to be as easy to manipulate as before. He kept squandering money at the gambling house and even secretly took a mistress. As for Lin Jiao, Su Man had tried to talk her out of it, but she still wouldn't budge. Su Man had no choice but to pin all her hopes on me. As for me, I just waited quietly. The wedding was set for the 8th day of the 10th month. An auspicious day for marriage. To make up for Lin Jiao's disappointment, Su Man went out of her way to make the wedding an exceptionally grand affair, as if she wanted everyone in the capital to witness just how noble and selfless the eldest daughter of the Lin family was. As for me, the bride, I sat quietly in my bridal chamber, letting the wedding attendant help me get ready. The woman in the bronze mirror wore a phoenix crown and a crimson sash. Her makeup was exquisite, and she looked gentle and charming. Only I know what thoughts lie hidden beneath this facade. Zhou Bo has already followed my instructions and compiled the ledgers documenting Qinzai's embezzlement of public funds into a single volume. He has locked them away in a secret compartment at the money exchange, along with evidence of Qinzai's secret mistress. We're just waiting for the right moment to deliver them to Mr. Lin and the owner of Jufeng's store. Su Man pushed open the door and walked in, her face beaming with a smile. Wan the auspicious time is almost here. Are you ready? I stood up and bowed slightly. Don't worry, mother, your daughter is ready. Su Man took my hand. Her eyes slightly reddened. My dear child, I'm so sorry you've had to go through this. Don't worry once you're married. I'll make sure Qinzai treats you well. I lowered my head and said softly, I'm not upset, father, as long as you and mother are happy. I'm willing to do anything. Su Man nodded in satisfaction and turned to leave. I watched her walk away, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Su Man, do you really think I'm still that pawn that anyone can push around? This wedding today is not my prison, but your place of execution. When the auspicious hour arrived, the sound of the suona filled the air, and I stepped out of my bridal chamber, supported by the wedding mistress. Qinzai stood at the front of the hall, dressed in a brand new wedding robe, a smug smile on his face. He thought that by marrying me, he was essentially marrying the Lin family's money house, and that from then on, he could rest easy. I walked over to him and joined him in the wedding ceremony. First, bow to heaven and earth, paying homage to one's parents. I lowered my head and looked at Qinzai's feet, clad in brand new official boots, and sneered inwardly. Qinzai, your good times are over. Just then, a commotion suddenly broke out outside. Immediately afterward, Lin's father walked in, his face ashen, followed by Uncle Zhou and several managers from the money house. Qinzai was taken aback. Father-in-law, what are you doing here? Lin's father said nothing. He simply slammed an account book hard into Qinzai's face. With a thud, the ledger fell to the floor. Qinzai looked down, and his face instantly turned pale. Qinzai, Mr. Lin's voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. You embezzled 3,000 taels of silver from the money house, kept a mistress on the side, and even dared to hide it from me. What do you take the Lin family for? Qinzai fell to his knees with a thud, trembling all over. Father-in-law, I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to. Mr. Lin sneered. Uncle Zhou, show us the evidence. Zhou Bo took a step forward and spread out on the ground. One by one, the contract detailing Qinzai's secret mistress and the IOU from the Jufeng. Qinzai looked at the evidence and collapsed to the ground. Su Man rushed over upon hearing the news and turned pale as she saw the evidence on the ground. She fell to her knees before Mr. Lin with a thud. Sir, I had no idea. That boy, Qinzai. You didn't know. Mr. Lin whipped his head around, his gaze as sharp as a knife. You brought him into the Lin family and let him and Jiao make a secret commitment to marry. Now he's embezzling company funds and keeping a mistress on the side. And you're telling me you didn't know? Su Man, what on earth are you up to? Su Man was left speechless by the question and could only keep bowing her head repeatedly. I stood there watching the scene unfold, my heart as still as a stagnant pool. Outside the door, the owner of the Jufeng Inn walked in with his men. He looked at Qinzai, who was slumped on the ground, and sneered. Qinzai, it's time to pay back the silver you owe me, isn't it? Qinzai shuddered and didn't even dare to look up. Lin's father took a deep breath, his voice as cold as ice. Qinzai, you have embezzled funds from the Lin family, and by law, This must be reported to the authorities. As for the silver you owe to Ju Feng, the Lin family will no longer cover it for you. From this day forward, you have no further ties to the Lin family." Chinzei suddenly looked up. His eyes filled with despair. "Father-in-law. Get out!" Lin's father roared. Chinzei was carried out by the crew of the Jufeng, and as they dragged him away, his cries echoed through the night sky. Shrill and desperate, Su Man collapsed onto the ground, looking as if her soul had been sucked right out of her. Lin Jiao rushed over as well. And when she saw the scene, she was completely stunned. She threw herself into Su Man's arms, and the two mother and daughter clung to each other and wept bitterly. I stood to the side, watching their flustered expressions, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Su Man. Chinzei. Lin Jiao. Do you think I'm going to clean up your mess? No. I just made the hole you dug yourselves a little bigger. Lin's father turned his head and looked at me, a hint of guilt in his eyes. "Wan I'm sorry for putting you through this." I lowered my head and said softly. "Father, I'm not upset. All I ask is that you take care of yourself and don't make me worry." "Mister." Lin sighed and patted me on the shoulder. "Good boy. From now on, the Lin family's money house is in your hands." I knelt down and bowed my head. "Thank you, Father." As I stepped out of my new home, the night breeze was slightly cool. I took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky. Chinzei was thrown in jail. Su Man fell out of favor, and Lin Jiao lost her patron. And I, at last, have reclaimed everything that belongs to me. As Chinzei was dragged out of the Lin family's gate by the men from the Jufeng, like a dead dog, the night wind was blowing fiercely. I stood on the porch, watching as he was shoved and fell onto the blue stone pavers, his knee slamming hard against the ground with a dull thud. He didn't struggle. His whole body seemed as if it had been stripped of its bones, leaving nothing but an empty shell. Su Man and Lin Jiao ran out after him. Su Man threw herself into Chinzei's arms and wept bitterly. Lin Jiao stood to one side, her face ashen and her lips trembling, yet she couldn't bring herself to say a single word. Lin's father stood on the steps, looking down at them from above, his voice as cold as ice. "As of today, Chinzei has no further ties to the Lin family. Su Man, you have failed to raise your daughter properly and have allowed your son-in-law to bring shame upon our family. Effective immediately. You are confined to the ancestral hall, where you must copy the admonitions for women 100 times. You are not permitted to leave until you have finished." Su Man looked up suddenly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Master. What? Do you have anything to say?" Lin's father's gaze swept over her. Chinzei embezzled 3,000 taels of silver from the Lin family bank and kept a mistress on the side. Are you really unaware of all this? Or did you know all along but deliberately kept it from me? Hoping the Lin family would cover the costs of his bottomless pit. Su Man shuddered and couldn't utter another word. Lin Jiao finally came to her senses, threw herself at her father's feet, and cried, "Father." Chinzei was just momentarily confused. "Please spare him." A momentary lapse of judgment. Lin's father sneered. "He embezzled your sister's dowry. It was your sister's very life. And you still have the nerve to plead on his behalf." Lin Jiao was so choked up she couldn't speak. She could only lie face down on the ground and cry. I stood to the side, quietly watching it all unfold. In a past life, my father had stood on those steps just like this, staring at me coldly. He said, "Wan marry into that family and pay off Chinzei's debts and bring shame upon the Lin family." Now, the people standing here have changed, and so have the words they speak. Lin's father turned to look at me, his gaze softening slightly. "Wan you've been through a lot." I lowered my head and said softly, "I'm not upset, Mom." Father Lin sighed and patted me on the shoulder. "From now on, the Lin family's money house will be in your hands, as the eldest daughter. And now that you're married, it's time for you to help ease your father's burdens." I knelt down and bowed my head. "Thank you, Father, for your trust." As I stood up, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye of Su Man slumped on the floor, looking as if her soul had been sucked out of her. Lin Jiao was crouched beside her, and the two mother and daughter were hugging each other and weeping bitterly. I didn't give it a second glance. I turned and walked into the new house. The moment the door closed, I leaned against it and let out a long sigh. Qinzhe is done for. Su Man and Lin Jiao, it won't be long now. In the days that followed, I used my newlywed status as an excuse to stay at the Qin family's home. Qinzhe was locked up in the dungeon of the Jufeng Inn. Su Man and Lin Jiao were confined to the Lin family ancestral hall, and Lin's father was too busy cleaning up the mess Qinzhe had left behind to pay any attention to me. That's exactly what I wanted. Under the pretext of paying off my husband's debts, I legitimately took control of all the Qin family's businesses. I used the Lin family's money house to pay off Qinzhe's outstanding debts one by one, but for each repayment, I had Uncle Zhou keep detailed records and affix the money house's official seal. These records will all serve as irrefutable evidence in the future that Qinzhe owes the Lin family. Meanwhile, I wasn't sitting idle either. Taking advantage of the opportunity to manage the Qin family's assets, I compiled a comprehensive record of Qinzhe's mistresses, his gambling debts, and the deeds he had secretly mortgaged for the Lin family's storefront. I gave one copy of these documents to Mr. Lin, one to the owner of the Jufeng Inn, and locked another in a secret compartment at the money exchange. A month later, Qinzhe was released from the dungeon. He had lost a lot of weight. His eyes were sunken, and he looked as if he'd aged 10 years. He knelt before me, bowing his head repeatedly. Wanner, I was wrong. Please save me. I looked at him and said calmly, Qinzhe, I've already repaid the 3,000 taels of silver you embezzled, but what you owe the Lin family is more than just that. Qinzhe looked up suddenly. His eyes filled with terror. I laid the ledgers out before him. Here is the deed for the shop you mortgaged without permission. Here is the debt you incurred at the gambling den. And here are the expenses for maintaining your mistress. All told, it comes to 12,000 taels. Qinzhe was trembling all over and couldn't even speak. I crouched down, looked him in the eye, and said, word for word, Qinzhe, listen carefully. Starting today, all of the Qin family's assets belong to the Lin family. The silver you owe the Lin family will be settled with these assets. If you don't agree, I'll hand this evidence over to the authorities and send you to prison. Qinzhe collapsed onto the ground. As if every last ounce of strength had been drained from him, he signed his name and pressed his thumbprint. I put the contract away, stood up, and looked down at him from above. Qinzhe, you owe me more than just silver. Qinzhe looked up. His eyes filled with despair and fear. I turned and walked out of the room without looking back at him. Outside the door, Uncle Zhou was already waiting for me. He handed me a letter and whispered, Miss, Su Man and Lin Jiao got into a fight in the ancestral hall, and Master Lin punished them by making them kneel all night. I took the letter, opened it, and glanced inside, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. The letter was written by Lin Jiao, begging me to spare Qinzhe and saying she was willing to marry him to pay off his debts. I crumpled the letter into a ball and tossed it into the brazier. The flames licked at the paper, reducing it to ashes in the blink of an eye. Qinzhe pressed his fingerprint against the scanner and slumped into his chair, his whole body feeling like a pile of mud. I looked at him, feeling not a shred of pity. In my past life, he had looked at me just like that, his eyes full of greed and scheming. Now, he was finally getting a taste of what it was like to be at someone else's mercy. Uncle Zhou, I said, my voice as calm as a still pond, put the contract away. First thing tomorrow morning, go to the magistrate's office to finalize the transfer. Zhou Bo gave a brief reply, carefully folded the contract, and tucked it into his chest. He glanced at Qinzhe, flash of disgust crossing his eyes, then turned and walked out the door with me. Outside the door, the night breeze was slightly cool, dispelling the stuffiness inside the house. I took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky. The moon was half hidden by clouds, like a half-closed eye, gazing coldly down upon the world. Young lady, Uncle Zhou said in a low voice, as for Su Man and Lin Jiao, should we? No rush. I interrupted him. Let them suffer a little longer. Su Man and Lin Jiao were locked in the ancestral hall and made to copy admonitions for women. This was a punishment imposed by Lin's father. But to me, it was far from enough. I don't want them to be punished. I want them to lose any chance of turning their lives around. Back at my new apartment, I sat down at the table and poured myself a cup of tea. The tea had gone cold, but I took a sip anyway. The coolness slid down my throat and into my stomach, making me feel a little more awake. I know that Chenze's downfall is only the first step. Su Man and Lin Jiao are the real source of the trouble. They won't give up easily. They'll definitely try every trick in the book to fight back. As for me, all I have to do is give them a little push when they're struggling. Early the next morning, Uncle Zhou took the contract to the government office. All of Chenze's properties, including 3 storefronts, 2 residences, and a farmstead outside the city, were transferred to the Lin family's name. When the news reached Su Man, she was in the ancestral hall copying admonitions for women. It is said that when she heard the news, she was completely stunned. The pen in her hand fell to the floor, spilling ink all over the place. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but couldn't get a single word out. Lin Jiao was completely devastated. She threw herself into Su Man's arms and cried, "Mother, what are we going to do?" Su Man slumped to the ground, her eyes vacant. She knew it was all over. As for me, I was just sitting quietly in the money house's accounting office, flipping through the ledgers. Zhou Bo walked in and said in a low voice, "Young miss, Su Man and Lin Jiao got into a fight in the ancestral hall and are demanding to see Mr. Lin." Without even looking up, I said, "No." Zhou Bo gave a nod and stepped out. I know Su Man will definitely find a way to meet Mr. Lin. She's a smart woman. She knows that at this moment, only Mr. Lin can save her. But she didn't know that Mr. Lin now felt nothing but disappointment and disgust toward her. Sure enough, Su Man sought an audience with Lin's father 3 times, but was turned away each time. Lin's father told her to reflect on her actions in the ancestral hall and said she could only come out once she had finished copying the admonitions for women. Su Man was desperate. She began writing letters, one after another, begging me to spare Chenze and to give her a chance to live. I put these letters away, one by one, and locked them in a drawer. These letters will all serve as evidence against her in the future. A month later, Su Man finally finished copying the admonitions for women. She knelt before Mr. Lin, weeping uncontrollably. "Master, I know I was wrong. Please spare me." Lin's father looked at her, his eyes showing not a trace of pity. "Su Man," he said, his voice as cold as ice, "you have failed to raise your daughter properly and have allowed your son-in-law to bring shame upon our family, embezzle public funds, and keep a mistress. Do you really claim to know nothing about any of this?" Su Man shuddered and shook her head frantically. "I truly don't know. I was deceived by Chenze." "Deceived?" Mr. Lin sneered. "You brought Chenze into the Lin family and arranged for him and Jiao to make a secret commitment to each other. Now he's embezzling company funds and keeping a mistress on the side. And you're telling me you were deceived? Su Man, what exactly are you up to?" Su Man was left speechless by the question and could only keep bowing her head repeatedly. Lin's father took a deep breath, his voice as cold as ice. "As of today, you are no longer the matriarch of the Lin family. Your name will be removed from the family register. You will move to the estate outside the city, and you are not permitted to return to the city without my permission." Su Man looked up suddenly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Master, get out!" Lin's father roared. Su Man collapsed onto the ground, looking as if her soul had been sucked out of her. Lin Jiao rushed over to her side and said through her tears, "Father, you can't treat mother like this. How dare you even speak?" Mr. Lin's gaze swept over her. "Your sister married in your place and cleaned up your mess, and what about you? What else can you do besides cry?" Lin Jiao was so choked up she couldn't speak. She could only lie face down on the ground and cry. I stood to the side, quietly watching it all unfold. In a past life, my father had stood on those steps just like this. Staring at me coldly, he said, "Wanner, marry into that family and pay off Chinzay's debts and bring shame upon the Lin family. Now, the people standing here have changed. And so have the words they speak." Lin's father turned to look at me, his gaze softening slightly. "Wanner, you've been treated unfairly." I lowered my head and said softly, "My daughter isn't upset." Father Lin sighed and patted me on the shoulder. "From now on, the Lin family's money house will be in your hands. As the eldest daughter, it's time for you to help ease your father's burden." I knelt down and bowed my head. "Thank you, Father, for your trust." As I stood up, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye of Su Man slumped on the floor, looking as if her soul had been sucked out of her. Lin Jiao was crouched beside her, and the two mother and daughter were hugging each other and weeping bitterly. In the days that followed, I officially took over the Lin family's money exchange. With Zhou Bo's assistance, I organized the exchange's accounts so that everything was crystal clear. I gradually cleaned up the mess Chinzay had left behind. Lin's father was very pleased with my performance. He said, "Wanner, you're even more capable than I imagined." I lowered my head and said softly, "It's all thanks to my father's wise guidance." Lin's father smiled. I know that when he smiles, it's not because of my competence, but because he finally has a daughter he can rely on. As for me, what I have to do is make sure he always relies on me. Su Man and Lin Jiao were living a humble life in a farmhouse outside the city. Upon hearing that Su Man had fallen ill, Lin Jiao wept all day long. I didn't go to see them. It's not that I don't want to. It's that I don't need to. They've already paid me back what they owed me, and I, at last, have reclaimed everything that belongs to me.